We all come from somewhere. Many people have a starting place that remains steadfast in memory. A place so familiar, it informs who they are from first breath to last. Others, like myself, have been created along the way, calling home wherever they land and thrive. As a travel writer, I've made my living in different countries and similar three-star hotels. Home is my laptop and any coffee shop that serves a rich dark roast. I've been to Myanmar and the Maldives, Afghanistan and South Africa, but never revisited the place of my beginning. Between flights and deadlines, I haven't had the time. But life has a habit of shoving us in directions unexpected. And unexpectedly, I was asked to write about my birthplace, Idaho. Idaho, ask my coastal friends? It's in the Midwest, right? My job is to conjure a place so vividly that it becomes your next destination. Ironically, Idaho is an unknown destination, even to me. As a boy, I loved maps and history. Longitudes meeting latitudes made the world look so easily navigable. The world has proved me wrong, but I still love maps and history. So, this is where my Idaho journey begins.
The non-native exploration of Idaho began with the fur trappers. And then after that, of course, folks came here for mining. And mining happened all over the state of Idaho, but really is very well known in the northern parts of the state, especially the silver mining, which continues today. We're one of the top silver mining producing states in the world. So the Oregon Trail is a really big story for Idaho, and people started to come west in 1843. When people came across this land, it was far earlier than water reclamation, so this was pretty dry desert, and very tough land. So a lot of people carried on and continued on to the coast. So really it wasn't until water reclamation, again in the early 1900s, where you could really do farming and you could really make the desert bloom. And that was an amazing transformation of the land. It allowed so many things. That happened in the early 1900s, and of course those improvements for water and water access continued to today. And that allowed companies like J.R. Simplot to be able to be the potato king of the world.
Today, the world still thinks Idaho is full of potatoes. That's true in southern Idaho. But if you do the math, the rest of the state appears to be 83,000 square miles of scenic postcards. With 4.7 million acres of wilderness, 3,120 whitewater river miles, 113 mountain ranges, the state is Alaska's forgotten twin. Add those wide open spaces to a population of 1.65 million, and Idaho offers the most wilderness per capita in the lower 48. Like most city slickers, I'm in love with the idea of wilderness. Protect the wolves. Don't feed bears. But in truth, I'm pitifully ignorant when it comes to nature and my place in it. To me, the natural world works like cell phone reception. It's out there doing its wondrous thing, even if you can't see it. Ditto, fishing. I know the fish are out there. Even if I've never seen them, Idaho is ground zero for trout dreams. But what about the real stuff of survival? Progress and paychecks? Does the 43rd state deliver? Clearly, the state produces plenty of green, and more than its fields of hay and technology. 80% of the state's energy comes from renewable sources. Sustainable energy projects are especially apparent in Boise, where Boise State University is applying geothermal technology to heat 4.5 million square feet of Idaho's capital city. Compared to New York or Seattle, Idaho's capital might appear more like a small town than the Emerald City it is, nestled against the foothills. Historians say this verdant oasis in the high desert received its name from Canadian fur trappers who called it La Rivière Boisée, or the Wooden River. Translated, Boise became Idaho's capital in 1864, eventually transforming the town of 1,600 inhabitants into the Gem State's biggest city. I find Boise deserves its accolades. A river still runs through it, and Bogus Basin ski area looks down on it. The Greenbelt bike path runs for 25 riverside miles, if you can't accept the average commute time of 18 minutes. It's a walkable, tree-lined haven that feels simultaneously old and new, quaint and sophisticated, with restaurants and shopping housed in classic architecture. The city is steeped in visible history, from the Boise Depot to the magnificent Idaho Capitol building. Designed by architects Turtelot and Hummel, this 1905 engineering feat utilized geothermal energy for heating and sandstone blocks dragged by convicts from Table Rock Quarry in the nearby foothills. But the Capitol was not the only historic building constructed by prison labor. Like so many Boise landmarks, every cornerstone has a unique story.
The Old Idaho Penitentiary is the #2 attraction in Idaho. I think there are a number of reasons why. There are only 4 territorial prisons in the United States that are left that are operational, and this is the only one in the Northwest. And so it's very unique. The architecture is pretty spectacular, Romanesque architecture. And over time, there are different eras of these buildings, but early on, the inmates actually had to be the ones who built their own prison, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. From when first people were incarcerated in 1872, all the way up into the 70s, when you think about a place like the old pen, you are actually in the place where people were. You're not separated from it, and so you can feel the memory of the people who were here.
My family came here in the early 1900s. My great-great-grandfather and his father-in-law, his claim was he was called by God to start a church in Idaho, and that's how they made the trek from New York to Boise, Idaho in the early 1900s. And my family has been here since. And it was the first black church in Idaho. And then when their congregation outgrew the building, they in turn decided to make it into a museum. Cherie was ahead of that front in doing so, and it became what it is today. But I think the most provoking thought is that you wouldn't consider Idaho to be a bastion of a black history museum. I mean, per capita, we don't have a large black population. There aren't very many black history museums in the country. And if we didn't have this avenue to push that information out there, I think we tend to look at humans as the us and them, or that's not our history. When, especially in Idaho, it's an integral part of Idaho's history. So I think it's really important to create that story or that narrative about, hey, no, this is part of Idaho's history, including like the Basques, the Chinese, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of little pieces of Idaho history that people just don't know about.
Welcome to High Aldi. I stumbled into this Basque cultural celebration without any idea the second largest Basque population in the U.S. lives in Idaho. Every 5 years, participants travel from all over the world to share in the old country events. Who expects to taste paella from the Pyrenees in Boise? The intersection of 2nd and Main Streets holds another secret. In 1870, this prime real estate called Spanish Village belonged to Idaho's famous mule packer, Jesus Arcades. The pioneering Mexican-American made his fortune transporting tons of silver through the mountains until he was 95. A few blocks away, Boise's Chinatown once thrived. Gold mining attracted thousands of immigrants to the gem state. In 1870, the census listed 4,269 Chinese men, 1/3 of the entire state population. But the state's most famous Chinese immigrant was Polly Bemis, the unlikely heroine of the book and film 1,000 Pieces of Gold. I feel a distant pride that we share an Idaho past, which is why I love history. It's a taste of immortality. Our forebears may have lived in a different world than we do now, but by standing where they stood, recalling their stories, people live forever in our imaginations. I can't help but think these early settlers would be stunned by what this city in the sagebrush has become. I am.
I think like a lot of things that happened in Boise, it was so homegrown and grown with the best of intentions. In the beginning, it was just, let's make this happen, let's see what we can do. That spirit still remains, but every year we grow by adding more and more contingents of other subsects of Boise, you know, Yoga Fort and Hack Fort and Ale Fort and Story Fort and Skate Fort. They're all extensions of the mission and the reason and the purpose behind Tree Fort. purpose of Tree Fort is to really exemplify and show the incredible natural talent that exists here. That's the musicians, that's the artists, that's the hackers, that's the poets and playwrights, that's our local beer, that's our local yogis. It's everything. It's only going to continue to grow. So the purpose is to uphold and exemplify and show on a national stage with national attention alongside other national luminaries that what we have here creatively is of a caliber and on par with any other city in America.
I am born and raised in Idaho, and so I love this place dearly. And one thing I love is the beautiful fall weather because it is perfect for tailgating. There are so many activities to do outdoors. You can go skiing, you can go boating, you can go hiking, you can just spend time at the college. And it's gorgeous year-round. We experience summer and spring and fall and winter, and you just never get tired of enjoying the beautiful nature around you.
If I had friends visiting from New York City, I would definitely bring them to the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. And they would probably be rolling their eyes thinking, we're from New York, we've seen it all. But I've seen Shakespeare in London and in New York and at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and I'm blown away by the performances here in Idaho. They're as good or better than anything I've seen anywhere in the world.
I know the meaning of those 19 years, a slave of the law.
Well, I've toured all around the country and performed in just about every single state, but I will say with the scenic backdrops of being in an outdoor space up here in the mountains in Boise, which I learned how to pronounce correctly. I was saying Boise, and everyone corrects me, it's Boise, so now I know how to say it correctly. You know, you can't beat the views. You know, translate that to Les Mis. You know, when I'm in the early factory scenes, I feel like I'm actually in the mountains or the foothills of France where like the factory might be, and I get to look through the set and see this picturesque landscape behind me. It really gets me almost every time.
This bird is a peregrine falcon. His name is actually Gus. He's one of our avian ambassadors here at the Peregrine Fund's World Center for Birds of Prey. We set up some breeding facilities around the country, and one of them was here in Boise, Idaho. And what happened was people started coming up. They heard about the peregrine falcons being bred up here and they wanted to see them. So we had to build a visitor center so that we could teach people the cool stuff that we were doing. And we actually ended up going much further than the peregrine falcon. It was taken off the endangered species list in 1999. So that's a huge success story, actually probably one of the biggest conservation success stories of all time. And we started working on other species. Condors feed on carcasses. A lot of the food that they find in the wild are remains of carcasses left by hunters. And the only problem is that many hunters still use lead bullets. When the condors ingest the lead, they actually end up getting sick and can die. One of the easiest things you can do for conservation if you're a hunter is to switch from lead bullets to copper bullets. Because the good news is, even though humans can sometimes be the cause of decline for birds of prey and other species, we can also be the answer.
About 8 years ago, decided to really dedicate ourselves to wildlife conservation. So we've always been a great place to bring your family and enjoy a Saturday afternoon. We're a great place to come and learn about animals and biology and ecology, but many of the animals that we have here and many of the animals that we have that are in the wild, they're not doing so well. And so we decided that we would become a place to help with the stuff that's going on in the wild. We are in the process here of developing and building a Gorongosa National Park exhibit. It's a 2.5 acre exhibit. It's going to tell the story about our conservation partner, Gorongosa National Park in central Mozambique.
This female closest to us is female number 2, and she was documented mating with a male at the beginning of May, so we've got to keep an eye on her.
This was a park that was destroyed in a civil war, and we're helping to rebuild it. And so we're partnering with another Idahoan, his name's Greg Carr, to help restore this park. But the other part, why this project is so important, is because Zoo Boise, we view it as now a little experimental lab for other zoos. We were the first zoo in the country to create a conservation fee. That's now been copied by 24 other zoos in the country. It's generated $9 million in support over the last 8 years. So how cool is it that you come to Zoo Boise and we can promise you, we can show you scientific proof that the number of animals in the wild is going back up because someone visited the zoo.
We moved here purely for the fact that we wanted to raise our kids here. It's a great environment for family. There's a ton of things to do. The fact that a lot of people don't know how cool it is, I think people think it's a really rural town where we're all on farms all the time, and the fact that you can drive halfway to the state and go to McCall, where there's a lake and amenities that can't be beat. You can go all the way up northern part of the state to Coeur d'Alene, where you have skiing and Sandpoint, and there's great skiing and water recreation sports up there. The Palouse, the rolling hills of the Palouse, I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. So the fact that Idaho still is a secret, I think, is the best kept secret.
The best kept secret about Idaho is that it is a secret. I think I'll borrow that line as my opening sentence when I stop staring at the scenery long enough to write. I'm headed north on the Payette River Scenic Byway. The river coils close to the road, sunk deep in the canyon by eons of relentless whitewater. Just 30 minutes from Boise, the Payette is a day tripper's paradise for rafters and kayakers. I'm not sure when civilization started slipping away, but water and sky pass without homes or red lights. No, really. In the 110 miles to McCall, I encounter one stoplight. This 2-hour drive to McCall offers every sport you've never conquered. I choose golf. To me, the game is more demanding of patience than 2 wives. But this valley invites me to suffer beautifully. Finally, the sun pushes me north, and I camp at Ponderosa State Park. Waking with the sun on Payette Lake, I feel like the second luckiest person on the planet. The luckiest are the ones who experience McCall year-round.
So my family has a deep history in Idaho, and especially in McCall. In fact, my father worked for the hotel for a little while as a bellman when the hotel first opened. My brothers and I grew up on this lake, water skiing, snow skiing at Brundage Mountain that's right behind us, and have spent basically summers and winters our entire life in McCall. And we just love this area. It's very special to all of our family. The Shore Lodge was built in 1948, so right after World War II, and it was essentially a escape for people in the Boise Valley to get out of the heat, come up to McCall. It's got a pretty storied past. There was gambling in McCall in the late 40s or early 50s, and the hotel was pretty successful as a weekend destination, and the activities speak for themselves in the summer. Water skiing, wakeboarding, wake surfing, sailing, swimming. Fall is spectacular in McCall. There's wonderful hunting nearby. Winter, there are 2 ski areas within 15 minutes of McCall. There's also world-class Nordic skiing. And also unique to our property is our sister property, the Whitetail Club. It's a 1,300-acre property just across the street from Shore Lodge, where we have over 10 miles of world-class mountain biking trails. We have 20K of Nordic trails in the winter, stocked trout ponds, a world-class golf course. So at our Whitetail Club, we also have 4 seasons of great activities.
My full name is Stuart Sandage Johnson, and I was born June the 2nd, 1916. We did not have roads in those days. The roads were more just wagon trails. I can remember they never plowed snow because we walked over the top and tramped it down, and there was no mechanized cars or anything when I first grew up in McCall. And when the railroad came in, why, of course, the town started up around that, and the train arrived in McCall in 14 was when it came into McCall, 1914. You know, I could talk from now until you went to sleep, and we wouldn't even begin. But anything that I tell you will be true. I never exaggerate or tell a lie, tell it differently. My parents taught me that, and I always remembered it.
Lloyd Johnson is like the Buddha of McCall. I want to sit at his feet and listen to his century of stories. His family founded this town. In 1924, he became the littlest ski jumper in the world. And in 1943, he brought smoke jumping to Idaho. How does it feel to be so securely rooted to one spectacular spot on Earth? I feel a bit jealous. I think I'm in love with McCall and flirt dangerously with the thought of spending the rest of my life here with a fishing pole. Then again, looking at the map, there are so many fish in Idaho. Time to head for steelhead country. The air is hot and dry, but I'm in a cold sweat. My route parallels the longest free-flowing river in any one state. The salmon winds 450 miles through central Idaho. And for those of us who like to fish, the river is more alluring than a pile of cash at every turn. This is my travel mantra. I fish, I fail. I drive, repeat. The salmon, the clear water, the snake, repeat. These rivers have been carving this land long before fly rods were invented, or gold lured the first prospectors to nearby Pierce in 1860. According to legend, the Nez Perce were created in these hills at the dawn of time. And according to American history books, 200 years ago, where I now stand, the Battle of Whitebird began the Nez Perce War and ended with Chief Joseph's famous words, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." History books have a habit of forgetting half the truth, so I head directly to the heart of the monster.
To be Nimipu is to know you feel loved by the earth and you know that you belong here.
It's important to us to keep our connection with Mother Earth, Father Sun, the Creator, the skies and the wind spirits, all these things.
The foods that we gather are all in their own season. A lot of the places that I go are very sacred places, places where my family has gone. It's both sacred and secret. Before there was Safeways or Albertsons, this is all they had.
Our language is the foundation of our culture.
The Nimipu have been of this land for thousands of years.
My name's Carrie Iatatamai Bridget Williamson. My Indian name is Iatatamai. It means voice carrying through the mountaintops. I got it from my great-great-great-grandma.
Inim Titokan Winikt Pinakwitilapt. And that's my Indian name, but kind of like a lonely traveler.
My legal name is Malvina Kilscrow. I'm a direct descendant of Looking Glass.
I'm known as Lukaps. Duplukapsimai is the formal name, and that means that you're governed by the North Star.
We're not all stoic. We have a great sense of humor and laughter, but we're not always portrayed that way. We're portrayed like this. Or more like...
We know our past and continue to honor its teachings.
Just remember where you came from. Remember who you are.
We are known as Nez Perce. We call ourselves Nimipu. Our history is long and is still being written every day.
I believe that the Nez Perce National Historical Park is significant to people today to understand that the history's been here for 10,000 years, that we're still here, but we're also very much stewards of the land. We take care of the land, we take care of the animals. With that, that's shown through our fisheries. We have a massive fisheries complex. We have massive wildlife complexes.
We live according to a sacred covenant with all things in creation. And it happens that most things in creation help sustain us.
Use your body weight. Pull like that.
You have just taken a life, and you repurpose that life in a way that's respectful of the life that's been given.
Get a brush,
You make things in a manner that is exquisite. So you make a deerskin dress, or you make a horn spoon, or a horn bow, because something else has given a life. You make it well. That's our solemn vow as people of this culture.
One of the most sacred items that we have in our cases at the Visitor Center in Spalding is the veteran eagle whistles. We have 3 eagle whistles that are made from the shoulder bone of the eagles to this day. Only a veteran warrior should own an eagle whistle, and they can only be blown during times of severe distress.
The National Park System has established 38 Nez Perce sites of interest. Along the roads of central Idaho, ancient legends give life to rocks, like the ant and yellow jacket, and the heart of the monster, and the Buffalo Eddy petroglyphs, 4,500 years old. In 1849, Henry and Eliza Spalding settled here as the first missionaries to build a school. But long before white men saw these hills, the Nez Perce spoke of stars in the rocks that gleamed like the eyes of the Great Spirit. In 1860, a chief's daughter led Elias Pierce to the stream that started Idaho's gold rush. Entering Lewis and Clark Valley reminds me the Nez Perce also helped write the earliest page in the history of the American West.
Over and over again, American explorers relied on Indian maps and on Indian guides. Without those maps, without those guides, the American exploration of the West would have been a very different enterprise. Surely, Lewis and Clark could have lost their lives. The expedition could have been rubbed out, except for the hospitality, for the generosity of Native people.
Looking over the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers, it's interesting to think about how different Lewiston would look if not for the success of the Corps of Discovery. By 1863, the gold rush made Lewiston the first capital of the Idaho Territory, an honor lost to Boise when richer southern deposits were discovered. Today, Lewiston is the farthest inland Pacific port. At the lowest elevation in Idaho, the valley enjoys the warmest winters of the state. From here, you can see the gateway to Hell's Canyon, the deepest gorge in North America. Like most people, I would have lost a bet on the Grand Canyon. Not all classrooms have walls, and traveling can be an amazing teacher. This trip has also widened my view of Idaho and kindly reminded me over and over to keep my eyes and mind open to what is waiting to be discovered. Pelouse is a French word meaning lawn. The lush wheat fields of this breadbasket explain how the area got its name. The quiet roads and rolling hills define the word bucolic. Every bend in the road offers a new palette of blue and green. Just beyond the Pelouse, the University of Idaho is not in Russia, but it is in Moscow, the second largest of the 4 four-year colleges in the state. The University of Idaho is also Idaho's first land-grant college, established in 1889. The name Coeur d'Alene, once again French, and translated means heart of the owl, a sharp tool. The name derived from the Indian tribe of the area, known for their shrewd trading abilities with early trappers. With a population of 48,000, Coeur d'Alene is the largest city north of Boise, and a spectacular recreational playland for Washington and Idaho residents. The topography of Idaho changes in the north, as does the time zone to Pacific Standard. Sagebrush has disappeared, and white pine, the state tree, proliferates the thick forests. What I didn't expect to discover along the road from Coeur d'Alene to Sandpoint was the largest amusement park in the Northwest. Onward to Sandpoint. Idaho will trick you into believing there's an abundance of untracked natural beauty in our world. Up north, these pristine lands and waters will also break your heart, a reminder of how much of nature is buried under concrete. Sandpoint offers a good balance. The hippest mountain town in Idaho sits on Lake Pend Oreille, the largest body of water in the state. This glacial lake sustained the Kootenai Indians for centuries, and the tribe returns the favor today, stewarding the endangered white sturgeon. These shores supported Idaho's first fur trading settlement, Kalispell House, built in 1809. And then during World War II, these depths harbored the Navy's covert testing of nuclear submarines. The sunset is pushing me to sleep, but I'm already dreaming about tomorrow's trout and movie stars.
Nell Shipman has always been a star and a story at Priest Lake. But as a historian and trying to put her in perspective for the lake's history, I came to the conclusion that she was a lot like those sourdoughs. Even though she was a woman, she was using the lake just the way the miners were or the loggers were for her fame and fortune. She often refers to the money she gets from her backers as her grub stake.
Nell, she actually described Priest Lake as her ultima thule, that is, the land which is beyond that which is known, because of its beauty and its remoteness and her ability to just put her feet down there under her and work.
Did you ever come to a place and instantly recognize it as your ultima thule? The one spot in all God's world where you belonged? Where your roots could go deep into the soil which would forever nourish you, where inspiration and spiritual blessing welled up from the earth? Such a spot, so it seemed to me, was Priest Lake in Idaho.
The Panhandle makes you believe in miracles. The forests remain dense enough, the mountains rugged enough to still dictate a person's destiny. With an average of 5 people per square mile, the land looks much the same as it did when the Kootenai and Coeur d'Alene were its only inhabitants. The 43rd state is only 2 generations old, founded in 1890. The state's written history is so new it's transparent. Everywhere you look, you see the early 1800s beneath the surface of progress. This is especially clear at Cataldo Mission, the oldest building in Idaho. Built in 1848 by Jesuit priests and Coeur d'Alene Indians, this historic jewel is constructed without a single nail. The handprints of its native builders are pressed into the mud walls. The statues were carved with nothing but knives, and the ceiling is still stained early morning blue by huckleberries pushed into the wood. I visited the Vatican, and devotion to divine task is no more apparent than in this handmade chapel. Idaho's Silver Valley offers as many historic sites as it does minerals. Legend has it, the Bunker Hill mine in the town of Kellogg was discovered by an ass, a runaway donkey that is, who led its owner to the Galena outcropping that sparked Idaho's silver rush in 1885. While mining continues, the town now lays claim to the longest gondola ride in the world. Kellogg is also next door to the center of the universe.
Here at the historic Jameson Saloon and Bar, which was built in 1892 here on 6th Street, we are at close to the center of the universe in the silver capital of the world. Right across the street from the Oasis Bordello Museum and the Northern Pacific Depot Railroad Museum, which is all major hubs of historic Wallace's history and cultural past. The entire town of historic Wallace is on the National Register of Historic Places. That is due to our cultural past and history. In 1889, when the town burned, being a wood-built town, wood-frame town, that the forefathers of Wallace decided to rebuild out of brick, stone, and masonry as a way to entice mining companies to build their headquarters in Wallace. As time passed, and with our mining wars, and with our gambling and houses of ill repute in our past, in 1967, the U.S. government came to town and decided that Wallace should be the location for Interstate 90 going from the Atlantic to Pacific Ocean. So some people in Wallace, some great people, they started designating building after building on the National Historic Register. When Uncle Sam came back with the bulldozers to plow right through the middle of town, effectively destroying the town of Wallace, they found out the town was blockaded by their own environmental impact rules that said they could not destroy these buildings on the National Historic Register. The history of Wallace, of course, and the history of the West was built by railroads. Railroads came in almost before roads were here. As these railroads have lost favor or lost commercial activity, and also with some of the cleanup that's been done, we've removed the rails from the pathways and created bike trails. We now have 2 fantastic rails trails that are listed on the Rail Trails Top 10. Also with that, we have the old Milwaukee Road, which starts in Montana but goes and accesses into Idaho through a 1.6 mile long tunnel. It is called the Route of the Hiawatha with 10 tunnels and 7 trestles. The tagline for Wallace for many, many decades has been that we are the silver capital of the world.
The jackleg is also the machine that we use to drill the holes that we load with explosives. I would begin drilling my holes in a certain pattern to help facilitate the ease of removing rock from solid ground.
They've taken over 1.2 billion ounces of silver out of the ground here, and there's more silver underground now than they've already taken out. So mining continues in the Silver Valley and in Wallace.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very welcome. Great job.
When you come to town, you realize it is a real living town. We are a real Western mining town, and we live it and breathe it.
Due to rocketing prices on precious metals, Idaho's mineral assets are currently valued at $900 million. This explains why Idaho is called the Gem State, almost. A bit of research revealed this state has produced nearly every kind of gem, including diamonds and the rare star garnet. Idaho maintains its promise of many riches, but material wealth is not what lures most people to the remaining Wild West. It's a different kind of dreaming that pulls people over the Continental Divide. America's best example will forever be Lewis and Clark in 1805 and Sacagawea.
Sacagawea's strength came from her culture. It came from her way of life. But I think most importantly, it was the fact that she was coming home. That was the most pivotal point, where fate came into hand. It was where Sacagawea met her people, but I think most importantly, it was where she found that Kimiawat was her brother.
And this is one of those moments when the stars dance for Lewis and Clark. When now, Sacagawea will not only cement the relationship, but now will become vital in the interpretation, for language, for building friendship, and of course, for getting those horses. It's a great moment. It's one of the great Lewis and Clark moments.
Sacagawea was born 2 miles from here. Her brother, Chief Camille Waite, was buried 3.5 miles from here up on the High Bald Peak. And this is the oldest settlement in the state of Idaho. I came to Tendoy in 1948. I've been here about 65 years right behind this counter. And I love it. I love all the people. They're honest, good, decent, hard-working people.
Viola might be the only person I know who doesn't own a cell phone. Instead of texting, she looks you in the eye when she speaks. Authenticity which is both refreshing and good timing, since I'm leaving civilization behind to go on a rafting trip through the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness. I'm a bit nervous about going off the grid. However, every year, thousands of people gratefully abandon technology to raft the Salmon River with Idaho outfitters. The Middle Fork enjoys celebrity status in the world of whitewater.
You guys need to relax. Jeez. Yeah, they're really.
Out of all the western states, Idaho is the hidden gem. It has the most spectacular rivers, the most incredible whitewater. It's by far has the best habitat for West Slope cutthroat trout. We have rainbow trout, bull trout. There are now salmon spawning in the main stem as well as some of the side creeks, so it makes it really special.
It's kind of cool being out here all by yourself, don't you think?
Senator Frank Church knew the value of this pristine heart of Idaho. And in 1980, he championed a congressional act to preserve these 2.3 million acres. The tonic of wilderness benefits all of us. Never has this universal gift been more evident than in the largest contiguous wilderness in the lower 48.
The place was originally homesteaded in 1898. 2 fellows, they called them the Buckskin Boys. They wore buckskin clothes. And what prompted them to homestead this area was the mines that were springing up, the gold mines that were springing up. which the ranch is 80.5 acres. On the upper end of the ranch is the homestead building where the original homesteaders built. We accommodate all different size groups. We operate the lodge year-round. We have quite a lot of summer guests come and enjoy the place, the trail rides and backpacking and just enjoying the facilities. We really strive to enforce the ethics within the wilderness area. It's absolutely one of a kind in the world, and that's something that I see everyone realize very quickly when they arrive here.
I'm English, my wife is French, and we live in Greece. We've just had a marvellous family holiday here in Idaho, going down the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. My parents gave me that sense of adventure, sense of going out there to look at new things. I wanted to pass that on to my son before he got too old and wouldn't want to come on holiday with his parents anymore.
It is so fun. The whole trip has been really something special. Cliff diving, kayaking, teamwork on the paddle boats. It was really something.
And as much as the clients want to learn, want to experience, then the guides are there to help them enrich that experience, whether it's trying to learn to fly fish, whether it's running the rapid better, whether it's learning about the craft of the people who were here before, the sheep eaters, the whole river experience.
One of my favorite quotes is from the writer Annie Dillard. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. Spend the afternoon. You can't take it with you. You can't test courage cautiously. This is my new philosophy of life, especially when it comes to fishing. I'll fail courageously until I succeed again, when another slippery cutthroat agrees to take my nymph.
Nice cutthroat, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty cool, huh?
Of course, we can't spend every afternoon casting for dreams, but Idaho has reminded me there are still plenty of hikes and fish for the taking. All I have to do is silence my phone and mental sirens long enough to enjoy the view, which is mandatory here in Stanley. Summer or winter, the sawtooths are so stunning, you'll forget where you're going, unless you're headed to redfish.
Yeah, Redfish Lake Lodge was built back in 1929 by a gentleman by the name of Robert Two Gun Limbert. And he was a champion of the state of Idaho, and he traveled around promoting tourism, and he had this vision of this lodge tucked in this rugged terrain that was going to become a gathering place for these Easterners who wanted to come out and experience a little bit of the wild, wild West. And Redfish Lake received its name because back in the 50s and 40s, when there was a large number of fish returning, there was actually a red hue that would take place over at the inlet or the outlet where the fish came swimming in that cast a hue on there. And so the name Redfish Lake comes from the sockeye salmon returning from the Pacific Ocean. Another great thing that's really protected this whole area is that back in 1972 they created the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, the SNRA. And because of that, this area, it's unique. It's not a national park. It's not like Yellowstone. It's stripped down so that you can do recreation. You can graze cattle out in the open land. You know, everything here is meant to be used, but it's also protected. And so one of the neat things about Redfish Lake Lodge is you can jump on a ferry, on a shuttle boat, and take a 7-minute boat ride and cut out a 6-mile hike and be at the far end of the lake, and immediately you're within the wilderness area. You know, the family traditions of people who have been coming here for so many years, where Grandpa came here as a child and then their children came, and now it's their grandchildren coming here, and the family traditions that people have here, and the fact that they can come here and again, just be real.
Captain John Stanley, the namesake of this valley, recounted in his journal more than 60 grizzly bears in the meadow below this summit in 1864. The grizzlies migrated to Montana, but the untamable sawtooths and the newest wilderness in America, the Boulder White Clouds, will keep the north side of Galena Pass wild forever. Perhaps that's why Hemingway chose Ketchum as his writing retreat. He found his muse in the uncharted territories of life, in love and war, in bullfights, and in Idaho. In my early years as a writer, Hemingway was my addiction. I read every book twice. And For Whom the Bell Tolls, written in this house, 11 times. I would have eaten those pages if I thought it could give me 1 ounce of his talent. Hemingway's happiest and darkest days passed in Idaho. Standing at his grave is the end of a literary pilgrimage for me. To Ernest, I toast, the man who made me want to be a writer. My martini shaker is the perfect thank you gift. Papa was only one of many Sun Valley celebrities, past and present. This town is still the Hollywood of Idaho.
Well, it's because the last one I did here was really just very close to Sun Valley, and it's great because not only the state is very appreciative of the films, and but it was nice to just go out in the morning and I'd be 20 minutes, I'd be at location, come back and sleep in your own bed at night.
And Bruce being
the thing I like best about Idaho is it's the perfect mix of old and new. It's got the people from the historic times and modern, sophisticated people also.
You talk about it, and I've never been here before. So we are out on the corner of Main Street for Wagon Days Parade, and
I love Wagon Days because it's just a tradition every year, everyone coming together, and it's nice to see like the old Western culture that used to be here, and it's fun to see everyone you know, and like everyone's so friendly here. And
I've been doing Wagon Days for over 20 years, and it's just a nice tradition. It's family. It's one of the largest non-motorized parades, and it's like a big deal for Ketchum, Idaho. We have a very strong ski environment. We have also a very strong Western environment for being in Idaho. We are an agricultural state, but we are also a resort town. We're a gem in the middle of a great state.
You know, Sun Valley opened its doors December 21st, 1936, but it wasn't by accident. Averill Harriman, who was the chairman of the board of Union Pacific Road at the time, sent a gentleman named Count Felix Schafgotz all over the United States to find the perfect place for a four-season resort. But he didn't find that perfect place until he came to Ketchum, Idaho. So he picked a mining town in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, to build this four-season resort. And the other thing he did for the ski industry is he invented the chairlift. The first 3 chairlifts in the world were at Sun Valley, and we're very proud of that. As a community and as a state, we're very blessed to have the Holdings as owners of Sun Valley Resort. With them as owners that still are willing to put money into this lovely spot, but not changing it and still make it very special. For example, the remodel of the lodge from 148 rooms to 94 rooms, and adding 30,000 square foot to the lodge, 20,000 of it being a world-class spa.
The spa at Sun Valley now boasts 15 treatment rooms, 4 of which are couples rooms, along with experience showers, couples baths, and a pool, which is actually a saline pool, along with the hot tubs. And you have gorgeous views of Bald Mountain, and as well from our spa couples relaxation lounge, you can come and relax and enjoy the mountain vistas. With Sun Valley, they celebrate the nature and the culture of this valley.
Most people would think of Sun Valley as a winter ski destination because that's what we were founded on. But to be honest with you, our busiest months are usually July and August. There's so many things to do here. We have 45 holes of golf, 3 outdoor heated pools, a wonderful fitness center, horseback riding, a gun club that teaches more beginners how to shoot than any gun club in the country. We have an outdoor ice rink, one of the 2 outdoor ice rinks that are uncovered and open year-round. And even more impressive, we opened the Sun Valley Pavilion, which is a world-class entertainment music pavilion. It's just a wonderful place to be, summer as well as winter, and we're blessed with 2 of the best ski mountains in the world here at Sun Valley. When people get here, it's certainly worth the experience. We are still an authentic Western town with a world-class resort right next to it, and they complement each other very well.
We call it the Code of the West because in the circle of rodeo or cowboys or the Western style of life, it's a code that we've just got used to, and it's instructive on how you should operate each day. Live each day with courage, for instance, is the first one. Take pride in your work. Everybody obviously wants to do what has to be done when it has to be done. I would also have to include in that, know that there's some things that aren't for sale.
Cowboys are my heroes. They know how to handle guns, girls, and guitars. But if you ride a horse for 8 hours, you'll realize the saddle is a bad fit for most of us. Cowboy ethics are one size fits all. The West was one with cows and cowboys, and trailblazers like Emma Edwards, the first and only woman to design this state's flag, and Philo Farnsworth, who was inspired by plowing fields to invent television. Idaho is, and always has been, the new frontier of the Old West.
Craters of the Moon started out about 15,000 years ago when the Great Rift erupted lava. And since that time, we've had 8 major eruptions. For the last 15,000 years, lava has been coming out of the ground at an average about every 2,000 years. It was first used by the Shoshone-Bannock. They obviously saw some of the eruptions. In the early 20s, Robert Limbert came out here. He's a taxidermist from Boise, and he started exploring it. He was amazed by the place. It was just fascinating. So he wrote an article for National Geographic, which appeared in 1924, titled "Among the Craters of the Moon." And rumor has it that that's what prompted Calvin Coolidge to sign a presidential proclamation that created Craters of the Moon on May 2nd, 1924. Since that time, Craters has had a lot of visitation, most notably in the 60s when the Apollo 11 astronauts trained here prior to their moon mission. And even today, we have NASA doing research out here for exploration of other planets in the solar system. Craters of the Moon today covers 730,000 acres. At the tree molds area is access to the park's wilderness area, which covers about 48,000 acres. It's the first wilderness ever designated in a national park, and so it's what makes it a kind of a special place. Right now, we're sitting in probably the most popular spot for tourists, the cave area. And this particular cave is Indian Tunnel, and it's 842 feet long, it's 40 feet high, and about 100 feet in width. One of my favorite comments I got a few years ago from a visitor was, "This is the best park that nobody knows about." And they just happen to stop by here either on their way to or from Yellowstone or the Tetons. And we'll have people come in the visitor center and say, "Hey, we just stopped, what can we do in an hour?" And we'll show them on the map. And they'll run out and come back in the visitor center 5 hours later and go, "This place is amazing."
Yellowstone. Even the word captivates our imagination. Like me, 4 million people a year road trip to this iconic national park. Unlike me, most fail to notice Idaho offers the most scenic path less traveled to and from Old Faithful. And along this route hides the best-kept secret of millionaires and moose, Harriman State Park.
I think the best part of this park is the fact that it's like virtually untouched since it started in the late and early 1900s. The same way the original people that created this place, the Harrimans and the Guggenheims and the Island Park Land and Cattle Company, it's still that way today. The Harrimans, back in the early 60s, actually gave this park to the state as a gift. They said, if we were going to give this to you, one of the things you have to do is create a professional organization to manage it. Up until that time, the state did not have a state park system, so we're the park that created the system. One of the reasons why, the Harrimans came here too was it was an awesome fishing retreat. The ranch sits on the banks of the beautiful, majestic Henry's Fork River, which is one of the greatest fisheries in North America. Fly fishing only, barbless hooks, catch and release only. And that's actually also within the deed agreement. The Harrimans specifically said that you shall only fish during these seasons with this equipment.
The park itself, you know, the 11,000 some odd acres that encompasses Harriman State Park, is surrounded by a national wildlife refuge also. So there's a cornucopia of wildlife to view within the park throughout the seasons. One of the more popular things that they do in the fall, as the elk herds move down into the park, they actually take evening tours out into the elk herd so you can hear like hundreds of elk bugling in the evenings. Not to beat Yellowstone down because it is a fabulous, fabulous place. But 30 miles from that destination is this place with the same types of wildlife, the same awesome trails, the same mountain lakes, then the experiences you can have with your family to get out and do those things in an environment not packed. Those are some of the things that we can offer you here that they don't offer there.
When I die, I'm going to heaven in Henry's Fork. If you're not a fisherman, please excuse my obsession and go there anyway. And on the way, don't forget to stop in southeastern Idaho. Topographically, the Panhandle to Pocatello appear to be two different planets. The Snake River has built its own highway of waterfalls, flowing from Big Mesa to Shoshone Falls, 42 feet higher than Niagara. Lava hot springs, Idaho Falls, Twin Falls. Bruneau Dunes and City of Rocks offer uniquely Idaho skyscrapers. Even more fascinating is what I discovered at Minidoka and Hagerman National Monuments.
After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in World War II, the United States had a knee-jerk reaction, and that reaction was later shown to be a reaction that was considered war hysteria. Hatred poured out of people, and one of the things that happened was the United States decided that there would be areas in the United States where all Japanese Americans would be rounded up and put into what Roosevelt called American concentration camps.
Minidoka National Historic Site was created to preserve and to educate people about the Japanese-American incarceration experience during World War II. And during the time of its operation from August 1942 until the fall of 1945, 13,000 people lived at Minidoka. People did not believe that they were truly American, although 2/3 of them were American citizens. And so many people feared that their loyalties were still with Japan. All Asians were discriminated against at that time.
Out of the 10 incarceration camps, we had more Japanese Americans volunteer to serve in the military than in any other camp. And most of them went into the 442nd, the most decorated military unit in the United States till this day. The 442nd had severe losses. They were incredibly brave. They would come back to visit their families. They would be in uniform. They would have to come through the guard station. They're serving their country, and their family was under guard and would be shot if they tried to leave the camp.
Well, Minidoka is a site of conscience. The Park Service has many of these sites. These are places where either there was the curtailment of civil liberties or the struggle to gain rights. The people who come here who were incarcerated, they had no choice in the matter. They had done nothing wrong except look like the people that had attacked Pearl Harbor. So you would kind of expect a lot of bitterness. But what we find are so many of the people come here and they're pleased that someone is remembering their history, trying to preserve the landscape so that we actually don't repeat this in the future.
Hagerman Fossil Beds is a really important site because it's geologically young. It's only about 4 million years old. And that sounds old, but it's during that time when we start getting a lot of animals that are very similar to what we have today. So when I talk about Hagerman, I'm not talking about glyptodonts or tyrannosaurids. I'm talking about horses and otters and beavers, things that you can find here in Hagerman Valley today. And so because of that, we're able to look and see how these animals reacted over the past 4 million years to things like a changing climate. and then maybe be able to project how their descendants might react to current climate change.
This park has an inordinate number of species, has a very large span of area in which fossils are found, which the park is over 4,000 acres. And we find little teeny tiny fossils, frogs and birds and mice, to giant fossils, things like mammoths. So it's a very interesting site for paleontologists, but also for the public.
You can even see on the side here how the bone goes all the way through there. It's covered up by the rock.
So they can connect with species that still exist today, and then they can also discover the species that no longer exist today, like giant ground sloths and bone-crushing dogs and saber-toothed cats that they don't get to experience today.
Traveling can literally be defined as following your vision. In this way, a journey is like writing a story. There's a beginning, middle, and end. And the end is usually less exciting, even bittersweet. My trip through Idaho has not been like this. The gifts are ongoing. Lloyd and Viola reminded me about the fine art of conversation. The wilderness introduced me to my first cutthroat and survival without a cell phone. I paid my lifelong respects to Hemingway and got an autograph from Clint Eastwood. I abandoned my fantasy of becoming a cowboy and adopted the code of the West. Most importantly, Idaho introduced me to the best part of myself I'd never met, the person who knows the value of taking the road less traveled. Idaho will do the same for you.